What a piece of junk.
She'll make 0.5 past light speed. She may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid. I've made a lot of special modifications myself. But we're a little rushed, so if you'll just get on board, we'll get out of here.
And just like that, we're back. Welcome to the second video for the Bandai Perfect Grade Millennium Falcon. So this video is going to be all about the painting. As it stands at the moment, the model is sitting in the same position it was when we seen it at the end of the last video. I haven't done anything else extra to it. So we now need to get the primer coated over on the underside with, sorry, banging the camera there, with reefer white. I've sat it in this box just so that I don't damage the gun on the underside. But at the moment, I'm not actually painting. I am applying the decals. So this is just the engine deck here from the back. So you'll see that there's a couple of decals here and here. Also on these little strut thingies, I've been applying decals. Still got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Still got 5 more to do, and then there's also another row of the same on the underside, just wee tiny decals. There's a load of decals on this. The sheet that it comes with is quite big. It actually comes with decals for each of the panels, but the panels will be painted on this this particular model, and there's lots of wee miniature decals that just go here, there and everywhere. And what I'm doing at the moment is I'm applying them before I start all the weathering. The reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to weather the ship, have it looking aged and distressed and worn, and then we apply these brand new decals right over the top. It just really takes the whole look away from the model. So the decals will get applied along with the base coat. It'll all look nice, crisp and clean, and then we start applying the weathering and the rust streaks and the chipping, etc. And that helps just create that whole illusion that this is a weathered ship. You know, it's been through the ringer, and the asteroid belt and various other bits and pieces. Anyway, so that's where we're at the moment, and we'll get moving forward, cracking on. Cheers. Right, it's just occurred to me that I've never actually demonstrated applying a water slide decal before. I just spoke a wee second ago about how I'm going to put loads of these decals on the model, and I've never actually demonstrated it. I'm sure pretty much everybody out there has done it, probably quite a few times. However, just for the purposes of demonstration, I'm going to just quickly talk you through that. So what you need: nice sharp scalpel, nice pair of tweezers, some water, and then, not essential but highly recommended, is some decal fix and some softener. You get different brands. This is the Vallejo one. You get loads of different brands out there. It doesn't really matter which one you use, it's just whatever you prefer. They're all much of the same and do all pretty much the same thing. So what we need to be careful of is we've got a couple of the decals on here already that are wet or just been applied, so they're still setting. So we need to be careful and mindful of that. And firstly, what we'll do is we'll take the decal off the paper and we'll get it into some water. They call them water slide decals because we dissolve them in water and they come away from the little paper backing. Now we'll just stick that in the water there. This is just ordinary clean tap water, nothing exciting. Don't need to add anything to it. And then whilst with that softening up, we'll just add a little bit of the fixer. Now I've already identified where this is going, so that's probably a bit much, but it'll do the job. It dries in invisible, you'll not even notice or see that. What I will say is this stuff's absolutely essential. I think you don't need it. But for me personally, I think it's essential. This softens up the material that the decals are made from. They are thin, but there is a certain rigidity to them, and it can be difficult. That's fine on a nice flat surface like this, but where you've got nooks and crannies and things like that, contours, you want the decal to flow over that and follow the contours and the edges, and that can be difficult. And they can crease and things like that. This stuff just really softens it up, makes it supple, and it settles just nice onto the painted surface. You see that quite a lot on sort of model aircraft and things like that. There's lots of panel lines, lots of rivets, so there's bumps and lumps and whatnot, and it can often leave the decal partly off the surface of the model, and it just looks horrendous. When this stuff's applied, it really softens everything up, and it just goes to the surface, and looks really smooth and matte as well, ultimately. You can seal up your decals once you've applied them a wee bit of just a wee matte primer, a matte top coat, just a clear gloss, not gloss, but a clear varnish, a polyurethane varnish or something like that. But I'm going to be weathering this and painting over it. Not painting over them completely, but just there'll be paint on it, round about it, to just take the newness away. So, and then eventually there will be a light dusting of the matte varnish I was talking about. Right, that should be soft enough now, so let's just get this out of here. There we go, and I'm just going to just gently put that on my finger. Now, this is actually upside down, so this is where the tweezers come in. And I just gently slide these off of here. So they're not stickers. They do have a slight adhesiveness to them, but that's where the decal fix comes in handy, because it really gives it something to really grip onto. Holds it nice and firmly in place. Right, so that's that one there. We'll manipulate that in a wee second. Just get a wee bit of the fixer, the softener onto my brush. Apply that over the top there. Get a wee clean. And then just using the point, these are needle point tweezers, so they're ideal for this kind of thing. Bigger decals, sometimes you're better with a more flatter nose tweezer. It just depends on what you're working with and what you're hoping to achieve. And so we're just going to gently manipulate that right into position, just moving it a wee bit at a time. Be careful not to rip the decal. They are very delicate and become even more delicate when you start putting softeners and stuff on them. So we don't want to ruin anything. So there we go, quite simple. I hope that's of use to you. Okay, moving on. So just before we get into the guts of the video, I just wanted to take a quick minute to talk about paint choices. So for this build, I'm going to be using the Archive X acrylics. For me, they're good quality paints, and they're about as screen accurate as you're going to get straight out of a bottle. If you wanted to go down the road a Pro Acryl or Tamiya or whatever, then again, very good choices of paints, quality paints, but you might need to look up some paint mixing recipes, etc. if you want to replicate some of the colours, or if you're not too caught up with the screen accurate thing, then you can just go with whatever colour choices you want if you wanted to do your own thing. But in terms of the New Hope film and miniature, these are the colour choices that I'm going to go with. Right, so we've masked off this first panel and the engine deck here, and what we're going to do is we're just going to apply some, I don't know if you can see that or not, lettering grey, SP lettering grey. Now, before we actually apply the paint, we need to apply a bit of Masco or liquid latex, same thing, to just indicate some of the chipping in the paint in the panel. Now, this model comes with some decals to actually colour the panels, but we're not using them. Why pay huge amounts of money for a lovely model to just not actually paint it. Seems quite silly to me. That's just my opinion. It's not to say there's anything wrong with people who want to do that. It's entirely up to themselves. Now, excuse me, I'm not going to get this absolutely accurate, but we're looking for it to be roughly there. We're just looking for some indications of scratches in the paintwork, and that's what this stuff will do. So when I then apply that over the top, sorry, when I apply the paint over the top of that and it dries, I then scrape away the liquid latex, and hey presto, I've got instant chips. So at this scale, mask all can be a bit of a pain, but I think we'll get there. So I'm just going to load the brush up with some paint, and I'll come back to you. Right, here we are. So we've got the paint mixed up in the cup. I think I made it a bit too thin, but we'll go for it and see how we go. Just going to hit up the hairdryer a wee second. So I think I've demonstrated this before, but there's different ways you can actually remove this. You can use your finger, you can use a rubber sort of silicone tip brush, kind of like the one same as what I used to actually apply the silicone. You can use your side of a scalpel, but a tweeze or something, or I quite like a toothpick. These are quite nice to just get in there. You don't damage the paint too much with these, and you can just get in there and just remove that, just like so. What I also like about these is, you see when the paint's quite soft, you can actually go in and create just little scratches here and there, and actually remove some of that paint just well before it's fully adhered. Particularly at this scale, it's good because it just breaks things up a wee bit and makes things just look that bit more in scale, if that makes any sense. Okay, you get the picture. I'm not going to fiddle every single panel that I'm doing, but this is just an idea, or gives you an idea of what exactly we're doing here, how we're achieving the effects. Yep. There we go. So there's our first panel. There's a wee bit up here. And you can just wear away some of that, and it just helps carry on the illusion of scrapes and scratches. Anyway, moving on. So I just wanted to demonstrate something here. So we're going to be applying some of this boxcar red. It's a very deep colour, and quite a stark contrast for the rest of the ship. You can see we've got some of the grey panels. We've got SP lettering grey, we've got the dark reefer grey, and we've got the concrete. All fairly close in hues, or sort of tone should I say, but slightly different hues of grey. Some warmer, some cooler, etc. But the boxcar red is probably the big standout colour that's on the ship by comparison. And so I just wanted to talk a wee bit about how I'm approaching the panels, particularly on a smaller scale, where bold colours tend to stand out a lot more than they probably would in a larger model. So turn that down a wee bit. Sorry, I had the airbrush turned away up for cleaning earlier. So I'm shooting my paint about 20 psi, and we've got this panel all masked off here, and we've got the masking fluid down for the chipping. And so what I'm just going to do is just go in and just lightly build up the colour. Now, hit it with the hairdryer for a second. And just let that bone dry. And it'll dry enough certainly at least to allow us to add a bit more colour. Now, I'll come back to that in a second. Right, and we're back at this panel, so excuse me, that's all dried in, and I've cleaned out the airbrush and I've loaded it up with a new colour. Now, this isn't on the original Falcon. This is a 1980s or 1980 shade of the Flow Quill SP Scarlet. It says Scarlet, it's really orange, but it's a deep vintage retro orange. It's a gorgeous colour. And all we're doing with this is we're very lightly misting over the red. Now, as I say, this wasn't done in the original filming miniature, but I'm doing it on this because it's a much smaller scale, and so we're trying to keep the colours a bit lighter, and so that they still give the overall same effect, but more suitable to a model this scale. This was actually my friend Ollie that had recommended this as a technique, and it really works. I don't know if other people have used it or where he got it from, but so all we're looking to do is just very lightly mist here and there, and that's it. I know it doesn't sound like much, but when it dries up and you see the model in its finished state, then it just makes that a slight bit of a difference. I mean, this is the whole point of this whole technique, is about layers and building it up and building it up and building it up, and that's how we achieve the effects, whether it's the grime, the weathering, the tones, the colours, the transition of colour and shade, etc. It's just how we go about it. Anyway, let's just peel some of this back and have a wee look at what we've done. Yep, there we go. So you can see, oh sorry, bumping that camera. So you can see there, the light's a bit harsh on that. If that's any better or not. That's probably, excuse the flicker for the LED lights, that's probably what I'm seeing more right now. What you guys are seeing on the camera, that looks much darker on camera for what it does in reality. But anyway, that's what we're going for. We'll just peel away the chipping. There we go. Look at that. There we go. And that's what we're looking for. So, what has likely been a few brief seconds for you guys has been weeks and weeks for me. I've finally gotten around to finishing all the panels. We'll get a better look at that just in a wee while, but what I'm going to look at showing you just now is a little technique that we're going to use for one of the weathering passes. Now, you'll see the radar dish here. We've got some really nice mottled patterns of dirt and grime on the radar dish. So how we achieve that is with a little bit of paint, and in this case the colour we're using is Dark Reefer Grey. So we've got our palette here, in here we've just got some water and we've got a splodge of paint there, and all we're doing is just mixing that paint, a wee bit of the paint with the water to make up basically just dirty water, dirty paint water. It just makes a really thin wash. And then what we do is just adjust the camera slightly. I hate that flash. It's just really annoying, sorry. We'll just go for this panel here just now since it's nice and close. And what we're going to do is we're just going to start applying with the brush We're going to spread it all about. Alright, and this is going to get into all the nooks and crannies. It's going to pull. I'm not going to worry too much about these blast marks just now because I've got other plans for them for the future. And all we're just doing is getting in and working that into the model, spreading it a bit. Just to create some dirty marks. Again, this isn't about doing panel lines and stuff because that's not really a technique that's used by ILM on the bigger miniatures. I know it's probably something more akin to smaller miniatures, but we're just going to work that about. So we've hit that with a hairdryer, and this is what we get. Very faint, dirty marks. That's essentially what we're going for right here. We're not looking to do streaks at the moment. We're literally just pushing paint a bit. Getting it into some of the crevices. Some of the surfaces. We're looking for random patterns. Spreading it about. We don't want it too clumped up because basically what happens is we end up with just big dirty marks that are just too dark and too obvious. Now, I don't know how well you can see that there, but we've got just in front of the brush there's a little decal. We want to be getting paint in and around those parts because we've got a newness to these decals that I spoke about earlier, I believe. Well, I'm saying I believe because it's probably that bloody long ago if I actually filmed it. But there is a newness to these decals. Excuse me. And we really want to cover them over. We want them to look weathered and part of the model too. So that there is an aged look to them. If we have these nice new clean decals and all this other weathered stuff running about, it's just the look's just not going to be there, is it really? Let's be honest. It's just going to look a bit strange. And it'll draw your eye right away. And we start to lose the effect of what we're going on. So as you can see, we're starting to spread this about, get it nice and thin, and then just hit it with a hairdryer. Simple as that. You hit it with it. If you're not happy with bits as well, if you want to add more to it, you can do that. You can take it away as well by kind of either airbrushing over the top of it, lightening it or whatever, you know, and just build it up. And as I say, hit it with a hairdryer. You might get things flying about a wee bit, but again, it helps create that random pattern. We don't want wee round circles. So we've got one right up here. Get that spread about. We want random shapes and patterns. So excuse the noise, we're going to hit this with a hairdryer a second. So don't be frightened to get in and about that with your paintbrush. Whilst the hairdryer's on it, continue to manipulate and spread things around a bit. Sometimes when we move, if we've got circles of paint, it's starting to dry around about the outside, but the centre part's maybe still wet. We knock the kind of top off that, we end up left with wee sort of circles and tide marks and stuff. And again, continues to leave this nice mottled pattern, tide marks, etc. Now, don't be frightened to just draw a fine sander across this at points just to lighten it as well. If there's bits that look too dirty, too thick and heavy, and it'll just remove that. Now, actually on top of this paint is what I've put is a very, very fine mist coat of a matte varnish, and it helps just protect the paint underneath, so that if I do make a mistake, there's a bit of forgiveness there. Right, so you can see already how that's starting to dirty up. Looks a bit harsh there in the light, more than probably what it is actually to the eye. I think just the LED lighting and the sharpness of the camera. However, so this is just the first layer. There's many other layers to go on there, like these greebly pits here. We're going to be misting them to darken them down a bit and flooding them out with a wee bit of this, a similar sort of painty wash. But you can see the sort of dirty marks we're getting. We've got paint that's been blown about with the hairdryer that looks like streaks and dirty marks and stuff like that. So this is us starting to build up the weather coat already. Millennium Falcon originally painted white, but looks grey in filming, and this is why, because we start to build up this dirty weathering on it. As I say, we're building this up in layers. There's another paint we're going to use to do this as well, to add parts, not as much, but we'll also be using foundation, and it just starts to add warm tones to the overall model as well. So at points we'll be using that as well to weather the panels. It's pretty much this technique described at the moment. Don't use a brand new great brush for it, because you end up with this happening over time. But don't, it's an older brush, so I'm not bothered about it, and it was quite cheap. So make sure you do that with a brush that's not particularly precious, and just take your time, work bit by bit, and you'll build up you'll start to build up the weathering. I probably should credit this technique. This is something I'd watched Andy Preston do. If you've never seen Andy Preston's models or his page or anything, go and have a look, because the guy's an absolute genius. It's just incredible. And what this guy can do with paint, it's nobody's business. So this isn't anything that I've developed. This is just one of the techniques that I've found while doing my research online about how these ships were all painted, weathered and modelled and all that kind of stuff. This is when we start to blend things together. Colours start to look a bit more muted, and the thing actually starts to come together and look a bit more alive. As I say, one of the many techniques that we're going to be using. We'll start to employ the airbrush. We'll use a bit of streaking. We'll use a brush for doing some streaking as well. I don't know if it was necessarily used by ILM, but I've got some weathering powders here that I'm going to have a wee bash at, just for doing some of the darker streaks at points, but we'll cover that at a later stage. Anyway, moving on. Okay, so we made a wee bit of progress with the front end here. You'll see that there's now streaks that have started to appear as part of the weathering as well. So I think when I done this side, when I done that initial demonstration, I think the paint mixture was probably just a bit too much paint to water. I've done this side and it just doesn't look quite as harsh. Felt as though that was maybe just a wee bit too harsh on that side. So these techniques are all trial and error. I'm much happier with what I've managed to achieve on this side here in terms of the stains and the marks and stuff. I've went in with the foundation as well. So this colour here, 1975 foundation. It's very much a kind of sort of fleshy skin tone, like sort of desert dust or whatever. So that was part of the weathering colours that were used in the original Falcon, just to kind of represent dust and dirt, and it gives it a slightly warmer tone. Takes away a bit from the coolness of the reefer grey. And starts to make the Falcon look a bit more like what we remember from on screen. Same technique with just really, really thin, and just start applying it with the paintbrush. The greys went over most of the ship, or pretty much all of the ship. I tend to be a bit more selective with the foundation colour. And so next we're just going to look at how we've done the streaking. Again, I don't know if I went a wee bit heavy-handed with the streaks on here. It's easy to do that when you're weathering a model. Excuse me. But where I can correct that is when it comes to doing the final mist coats. Be able to sort of soften that off a wee bit. So I'm not going to get too caught up with some of the kind of wee I suppose, mistakes that I've made. And that's the whole point of these videos, is to learn from my mistakes. You'll see I've also got the canopy cover on the nose cone, and I've now finally put the dish on as well. I feel as though this is a stage to put these on, because I want the weathering to all blend. There's no point in having that weathered and that weathered, and then you stick them on and it looks completely different from the rest of the ship. So I really want to make sure that I'm keeping capturing that as I move through. Bear in mind, this is a multi-layer thing. You know, there's going to be different types of misting. Some of the panels will be getting sort of masked off, and there'll be wee bits of mist getting applied here and there, and then there'll be that kind of bigger mist towards the end as well. But anyway, we'll come back to that. So what we'll do is we'll just show you now how we go about applying these streaks. So if you just bear with me, we'll get set up for that. Right, so what we've got here is this dark slate grey pigment. This is one of the Vallejo ones. Any of the pigment powders will be good for this. Again, not necessarily a technique that was used by ILM, but I mean, I think as far as I'm aware, all the streaks were applied using an airbrush, and that's all fine and dandy when you've got a 5 foot across ship. I mean, this thing's in 172 scale. It's not that big. I mean, it's big, you know, for a sort of standard 172 model, but you know, by comparison, a 5 foot model, you know, there's lots of space in there for doing really nice airbrush work, and a bit harder to replicate on a smaller scale, so we have to adapt. So what we're going to do is we'll get the pigment powder in our palette here, and I'm just going to add in some standard airbrush thinner. You can use water as well. I like the airbrush thinner because it's got the what do you call it? The retarder, that's it. That slows the drying of the paint. So this stuff doesn't stick very well. It's not got great stickability. It is purely just a pigment, so it needs something to carry it. Me personally, I quite like a wee bit of matte varnish, or you can use a matte medium, whatever suits. That's just a couple of wee drops in there. Just enough to give something as a binder. I'll just put a couple of drops of that in there, and then what we're doing is we're just mixing that up, making that nice and thin. Just like that. And then once you've got it kind of quite thin, you can then see on the light palette there what kind of effects you're going to be getting. You want to make sure you got all those pigments dissolved. So a good mix is key, like any sort of paint. It's got to get a good mix. This leaves a nice sort of matte chalky texture, which is perfect for our streaking that we're looking for. And so we'll just give my brush a wee clean, and then we'll start applying that. So we're under quite harsh light here, as you can see. And I've already started to apply a couple of streaks. What you're going to need is your wee bit of paper towel or something, just to make sure that you've got something to wipe the stuff with. Now, in some cases, you could be applying these wee streaks and that's enough. Other times you just want them just a wee bit more subtle, and you do that by a wee wipe. There we go, look at that. A wee wipe takes it all away, but leaves a nice wee stain. But you can also build up on that if you want, and you can use your finger as well, and it just starts to change things a wee bit. As I say, we're all about building up in layers. The trick for good streaking is straight lines, but I'm terrible at straight lines. Never seem to be able to get it very well. So we're just building that up a wee bit at a time. There we go. Get some nice streak stains. So you could just imagine if the ship's sitting somewhere and it's dirty and it's grimy, there's rain pouring down, there's oil leaking out of it, or grease or whatever, you know, this stuff tends to get washed down. One of the other techniques that I'll show you as well that we use, or what I've been doing here, we don't use washes as such, you know, that you would, as I said to you before, in the traditional sense. But what we can do is we can just apply some of this over some of these parts here, like that, and then just dab in. And then it leaves behind stains, marks, a bit like what we were doing before, only a wee bit more intense. And it just gives that indication of grime, dirt, and grease and stuff like that. That build up of just soot and all the stuff that you could imagine would feature on a ship like this. So let's go in for a bit more streaking. Let's just move the camera a wee bit. We'll go into this grey panel for a wee change. And so the coloured panels as well, they will also have streaks on them. And we look at some of the little greeblies that's on here, and you can actually have some of the streaks coming from them, and you can work down panels actually and give the indication that there's actually stuff coming off some of the other panels as well onto the next. You don't have to just work, you know, individual panels, if that makes any sense anyway. And it's just building this up bit by bit. If you're not happy, worst case scenario, you might have to just go and scrub some of that paint off and tidy it up a wee bit. But you get what I'm aiming for here. You get the gist. And so we'll just build up what we're after. Okay, happy enough? We'll move on. Right, so I'm just going to run about doing a wee bit of misting with this colour here. SP Lark Dark Grey. Amazing colour for carbon scoring and blast marks and all that kind of stuff, smoke, soot, etc. Again, it's not black, but it's a nice dark colour and it gives that kind of sooty, warm sort of sooty colour. Anyway, right, so greebly pits, these things here, really interesting bits of detail on the build, on the model. What we do is we just flood in a bit of quite thinly mixed colour on top of the white, and then we just go lightly round about, just feathering a wee bit with the airbrush, just to give that kind of interesting look that it's got in the model. Now we just flood in the colour a wee bit there, not too much, and then we just use the airbrush to blow it a bit, and it'll find its own level. Simple as that. And then round about the outskirts it, just go around with the brush, just a wee bit of feathering. There we go. Simple as that. Looks a bit darker on camera as per, but overall that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for a perfectly neat circle. Just we want it feathered, we want it looking slightly different around about each part. Another wee tip we've got for you here right now is some of your panels, get a bit of tape on there and just lightly feather at the side there, and it just gives a slightly darker aspect to one part of the panel there. Makes it interesting, gives the model a bit of variation. Dirty marks, etc. Again, we talk about layers. This is all this is. It's just layering up the colour bit by bit, giving the model the look that we're after. let's just get in here just while we're at it, and I'll show you. Use your masking tape. Doesn't have to be perfectly neat. And we're just going in, a wee bit of feathering. There's already a stain there. Just adds a wee bit more to it. Changes the panel slightly. There we go. A lot of these marks and streaks aren't screen accurate. And to be honest, I'm not going for 100% screen accurate. At this scale, it would be a monumental task that I don't have time for, my client doesn't have time for. What my brief is for this is something that looks like it's just stepped off the screen. And hopefully so far that's what we're starting to achieve. Hopefully. So, there's more colours to add in terms of the weathering, when the misting and stuff like that. And as I say, as I keep saying, I keep repeating that, but I think it's a really important thing to bear in mind that a lot of this will be slightly lighter and just completely covered in a fine of grey, sort of warm, sort of grime colour, and it just ties everything together. It's just all about building up those layers. See in a minute. See, when we're building a model, or painting a model that's for the purposes of display, we talk about the importance of the subtleties as much as we talk about the importance of the main aspects of the model, like the colours. So the main colour of the body, the main colour of the panels, etc. Even the choices in the weathering colours. And that includes things like dirt, grime, grease, carbon scoring, etc. But also rust. Rust's a really important one. Now, this is quite a nice orange colour. Again, another quite a vintage sort of hue. This is 1975 Reefer Orange. And it's not hugely obvious in the model. Very, very subtle. And so just, you could really go over. I mean, I know I can go over the top with, you know, with streaks and stuff like that at the best of times, but this is one that's really important that you don't go over the top with. And I know I spoke earlier about not using the airbrush for the streaking and going for the hand painted approach. This one's fine because it's just dots here and there, little wee mists, wee droplets of colour, just enough to break up the monotony of, like, in these greebly pits, etc. I don't know how well you'll notice that in camera, but there's a few wee light splashes of the Reefer Orange in there, and it would just give you the subtle hints of rust. So on the panels, it's just going to be a wee light streak. Now, we've done this before. There's lots of other guys who'll show you how to do streaking with airbrush, John Simmons, etc. He's got lots of really cracking videos of how he approaches his streaking, and you really want the air pressure down low, and just a small amount of paint coming through your, so, you know, just the smallest, subtlest amount of paint coming through your brush. I like to start off a piece of tape, and then we just pull down. And build up. There we go. And that's all you're after. That's enough. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's nothing fancy. It's just a small amount of colour. Giving you that indication that there's a wee bit of corrosion going on. We don't even need to do every single panel. With just a couple of bits here and there, and we just give you that indication that that's happening. Alrighty, it's just another one of the layers that we're building up. I'm acutely aware that this video is now running on to just almost an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off here, and there's not a huge amount left to do in terms of the different effects. So we'll pick that up in the next video, and we'll tie it all up at the end. Cheers, thanks for watching. Cheers and out.